Okay, let's begin. So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining me in this talk. And before we begin, I want to tell you something. So, having written code in various different languages like Clojure, Node.js, Python, Java, I've developed so many data pipelines and algorithms, and I felt like I needed something new. I felt like I wanted some new challenge. And when I was thinking about this new challenge, the first thing that came up to my mind was, what about developing tools for developers? Because what's a bigger challenge than that? And that's because, developers are picky. They like their tools to be good ones. And so this is how I decided to become a DevOps engineer. And because I knew that this is what I want to do, I went out and looked into what it actually means. And now I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert, and I'm going to tell you what I gained from it in the end. And then we'll go back to the start and talk about how I did this. So, what I gained from being a DevOps engineer was the first thing was getting an exposure to a wide range of problems and engineering solutions. And that's because I am working with many different teams within the same job. If we think about working as a backend developer, for example, you work with your own team or maybe with one or two other teams, and you mainly work on the same problems. But as a DevOps engineer, you talk to many different teams and you think together about their problems. And another thing that I have to say that was elevated after I became a DevOps engineer was my coding skills, because the code that I write is the product that the developer will use. And, developers, they know good code when they see one. And they will also know not so good code when they see one. So those two big things happened to me after I became a DevOps engineer. So now I think it's a good time to start our talk. Going from a backend developer to DevOps, and I wrote the Force Awakens because, oh yeah, this is a force right there. So let me introduce myself. My name is Beisaron. I've been a backend engineer for over 5 years, and today I am a senior DevOps engineer at Forder. I've been writing in Clojure, Node.js, Python, Groovy, and you know what? Clojure is still my favorite language until today. And I'm also an international public speaker and mentor, which means I love helping other people get to the stage and talk about their tech knowledge and anything that they want to share with the world. I do that internationally, which means that I go to tech conferences around the world, and I enjoy that very, very much. So, the last thing that I want to share is that I'm a sworn Star Wars fan, and I don't think you could have missed that because, look at all those things that I have in my background. But it's not the background that we're here to talk about or Star Wars, although this is the theme for today. We are here to talk about the milestones for becoming a DevOps engineer. So, yes, we are going to go through those milestones that I went through on my journey to becoming a DevOps engineer. And the thing that I would like you to remember is that those milestones were not just effective in my current role. I used tools and ideas that I used before in my previous roles, and that worked for me also there. So I invite you to listen carefully and be sure that the things that I will share with you today, I believe they will be helpful no matter what role you currently have. So let's dive in. We're gonna go through three main milestones. The first one will be learn. We will talk about efficient ways to comprehend new complex systems and how to do that in a fun way even. And then we will talk about listening, which is the required transitioning of your mindset when you become a DevOps engineer after being a customer facing product developer. And then we will talk about be the force. What does it mean? I don't want to spoiler this to you, so let's roll. Get it? Okay, let's begin with the first one. Learn. So that's the word, stress, because that's the first thing that I felt when I stared at the list of things that I need to learn when I just joined Forder. I saw all of those things, and there was a lot of very useful and good information. And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to learn all of this? My heart was beating so fast, and I was so stressed because it's not the first time that I am switching jobs, and I've had my years in the industry, but still, this was different. And then I said to myself, okay, all you gotta do is breathe. But honestly, not really. That's not what I did. What I did was I remembered that I have a very powerful tool that I used in the past when I learned something new, which is to use my own words to describe something new. And let's see what it means practically. So I went ahead and I drew this very simplified CI/CD pipeline of what we have at Forder. And by doing that, I was able to take this and talk to my teammates and ask them about the places where I thought that I knew and got it correctly, and maybe I didn't, or maybe they reaffirmed me and said, yes, you got it right. So doing that and talking to the other teammates with using my own words helped me to better understand the parts that I didn't understand and to get reassured on the parts that I was already good on. So that's the first thing that we have in our learning toolbox, using your own words. So now that we have that, using your own words and that pipeline that you drew, the next thing would be to start asking questions about it, right? I mean, we're talking about the knowledge that I already have, but now let's start asking questions. But the thing is that when I started asking general questions, it was a bit problematic because the replies that I got, sometimes they were just too broad. And I knew that I needed a different approach. And this approach was asking calibrated questions. And what does it actually mean? Asking calibrated questions, it means that you're aiming at understanding the why rather than the how. And here's what I mean by that. Those questions, they help us understand, they aim to help us understand the why the choices that were made, and also it will help us understand what are the requirements that the company has, or what are the constraints that brought us to where this system looks today. So let's take a look at like 2 examples of calibrated questions that focus on the why. So for example, you can use questions like, what are some common use cases for this tool? So for example, if I talk to my teammate about Jenkins, I would ask, what are some common use cases for this tool? And are those the use cases that got us to going with Jenkins for CI, for example? Another good question would be, what other alternatives were considered when you started building your CI pipeline? And now asking about the alternative that were considered, that will help you discover 2 interesting things. First of all, you will know if people are happy with the current choice, and get this, like when you start talking about the alternatives and whether the teammates, they like this tool or not, it always sparks up like a very spicy conversation. Sometimes they will say that they love it, and sometimes they will say that they're not really, it's not their best friend. And maybe you will discover more things about the behavior of your system, or maybe you will discover that we actually want to make some big changes later down the line. So those calibrated questions are aimed to understand a lot of the whys that your system have. So next, now that we have those user words and calibrated questions in our learning toolbox, the next thing that I experienced was a memory attack. because in those, first few days or even months, I felt like my memory is betraying me. I mean, there was so much information and a lot of things to learn, and it was just, it was overwhelming. And I felt that I needed a way to start, you know, um, getting things to stay with me, and not everything was documented for a reason. Some things, for example, like how you do this or how you do that, those things are not documented because they're just too simple to document. So that's what I did. I went ahead and I started taking screenshots of things, and I placed arrows and, simple, stupid explanations of how to do those simple things that nobody, documented before. Because it's not worth documenting how to do Jenkins script testing. It's just something very little. As you can see, it's three arrows and just me saying to myself, you need to press on the replay button. But when I had all of that information to remember, those screenshots, they were actually pretty helpful. So that's it. These are the main things that helped me when I was in the learning phase. And obviously, I'm still in the learning phase because we learn all the time. But those are the things that helped me in the very beginning. Using my own words, using calibrated questions, and doing those how-to guides to, handle that memory attack. Those are the things that were truly, truly helpful at the beginning. So next up, listen. So listen to this. After I finished the onboarding part, I was starting to work on some tasks. One of those tasks was to develop or add a new feature for the deployment system, to do an automated part of the deployment. And I was so happy about it. I was so excited because I knew that I implemented it in a very good way. I mean, so did the code reviewer thought, right? So we had that new automation for the deployment. We thought that it's really, really good. And I published it in the Slack channel of the engineering, and I waited for those happy emojis, and they came. But you know what else came right after those happy emojis? A private message from someone asking me, hey, how do you turn this thing off? And I was like, what? Why? But it's really cool. Why would you want to turn this off? You know what? If you develop a very, very good system, or a really, really cool, efficient feature, but people don't want to use it, is it really that good? What happened here? How did that happen to me? Well, it's because I didn't change my mindset. It's not the same, being a developer who is developing customer-facing products and being a developer who is developing tools for developers. Because I am still a developer, right? We have a different name, it's DevOps, but I'm still developing tools for developers. So what is this mindset change that I needed to make? What am I talking about? So I was able, I think, to get the source of it, to put it in very, very accurately. That made it, it kind of helped me to rearrange my thought around this area. So here's the thing. As a backend developer, when I started working on a certain feature or a new project, I was told what was needed to be done. For example, we want to have the customers to be able to do this new query. We want the customers to be able to do this and that, and this requires maybe an API change. We were talking about the what when we were talking about this new feature. What is needed? But as an infrastructure developer, or as a DevOps, you are also talking with your teammates about the what, but then you also need to talk about how. Because the way that I develop those tools, or the tools that I choose to use, later on, the developers will use them, and it affects them. So this brings me to my next point. DevOps is about fostering a culture of collaboration. And I'm not just saying that to have like a nice, cool cliche, here with the Darth Vader looking at us from the side of the slide. I'm talking about the fact that fostering a culture of collaboration, it means that you want to collaborate with your teammates, obviously, but also with your customers who are sitting right at the end of the hall. You will meet them at breakfast. You will meet them when you go get coffee. So I'm going to give you an example for how I started to collaborate with the developers who are my customers. So my next challenge was to plan the architecture and develop the deployment definition for Kubernetes. Now, this was a pretty big challenge. At Forder, we have about, I think, 120 engineers in the engineering department. If it's a bit, much more than that or a little less, don't get me on this word, but it's not so small, right? Forder is not a small company. So planning this means that it's going to affect a lot of developers. So for this task, I had two options. I could have gone with an in-house tool that is currently written in Python, which means that I'm using something that the developers are already familiar with, but there is no information. They can't Google it because it's an in-house tool. The other option that I had was to go with an industry standard tool, which is Helm. Now, it's new, it's different from what we had until today at Forder, but this means that there is information out there that they can get. So, how do I know what to do? I just go ahead and ask the users. Now, how do I do that? I did that in two ways, and I didn't do it alone. I did that with my team, actually. So after I published the architecture design review document, and all of my teammates reviewed it, and also people from my group, I published it externally to the engineering department, and I asked for people to take a look. Now, I know that reading documents is not the most exciting thing, to be honest. So the next thing that we did was we had a Helm preview presentation. We just gave 30 minutes of time of Helm, and we showed the developers what their Kubernetes life will look like if we chose to go with Helm. And you know what? It worked, because we were able to hear their thoughts. We were able to learn about their fears and maybe what the things that they expect to have when they think about Kubernetes. And so I learned this, that when creating infrastructure, it's so easy to get caught up in optimizing performance and in costs. But if we're not considering user requests and the user experience, the infrastructure can become unusable or difficult to navigate. And this could bring to a whole bunch of errors, security issues. Trust me, the list is long. So let's put it out there, okay? User requests are just as critical as performance, cost, and ease of development when making architecture decisions. And that is, I think, the biggest change that I had to make in my mindset when I started, when I became a DevOps engineer. So that's not the only thing that I did, because I said that DevOps is about fostering collaboration. And I said that it's not just with your teammates or your customers. Here's the third part to it. The third part is to collaborate with the DevOps community. And when I had that choice to make, whether I want to go with the in-house tool or go with the industry standard tool, which was Helm, I decided to go around and start asking people in the community. What did I ask them about? First of all, I asked them about the tools that they chose. Because look, many companies, they face similar or even identical problems, and I can learn from their mistakes or successes. And another thing that I can ask if I want to make a big change in the company, I can talk to them about their adoption plan. How did they bring this to the developers? What did they do? What did they do that worked? What did they do that didn't work, maybe? And another very, very important thing is to ask others about the pain points and pitfalls, but not only technically, because technical issues, they can be related to, lack of knowledge, or maybe adaptations that their specific systems needs during the integration part. But the pain points that I'm referring here to is actually in the user experience. Because if I ask someone that I know that they started to use Helm, I ask them, how did your users react to using Helm? What did they feel about it? Was it okay for them? Was it too complicated? If we start having this discussion and I can learn about the user experience, around this tool, then I know what to expect. I know that maybe it's not as easy as I thought personally that it's going to be when starting to use this tool. So, asking all of these questions, it sounds very good, but where do we do that? Where can I find that community, those people? Well, easy. First of all, meetups and conferences. That's always great grounds for making, new contacts. But also, to be more specific, you can really ask people there about those specific topics. Because if you go to a conference that is like a DevOps dedicated, or even if it's not a DevOps dedicated conference, if there are a few talks that are, about DevOps, then you know that you can find those people and ask them about those specific topics. And another thing that I did was to reach out to developers and repo maintainers. So for example, there was this plugin that we used for one of our tools, and I wanted to know something, if this plugin is good enough for what I need. And I just reached out to the repo maintainer, and don't be afraid to do that. You know what? If they don't want to talk to you, they just won't answer. But you'd be surprised how many people are so willing to help, and they're so open for getting messages from people that they don't know. So try it out. And I think the last thing that I would like to recommend is joining community Slack or Discord servers. And I mean, I know we all have enough WhatsApp groups and Slack messages and Slack channels, but those were actually helpful when I had to make big decisions, like choosing the policy engines, for example, for Kubernetes, because I just went into the Kubernetes workspace in Slack, and I looked for the policy engines that I was examining, and I looked for messages containing the word errors or annoying or failure. Those were pretty good ones to discover the real things behind that tool that I was examining. So this is what I was talking about when I said that DevOps is about fostering collaboration. It's about talking to your teammates, talking to your customers, and reaching out to the community and getting help from them, and also obviously helping them out yourself. Which brings me, or us, to be honest, to the very last milestone. And I know you've all been waiting, because be the force, right? So let's be the force and talk about what happened there. What was I referring to? All right. It's just in the next slide. So my next challenge was to plan and prepare the migrations to Kubernetes. Now, obviously, again, it wasn't my own challenge alone. I am a part of a very big group and a very, very good team that everyone is working on the migrations to Kubernetes. But, I took a very specific part in the planning of those migrations, not just the technical part. I was taking on the part to using the force. Again, May, what does it mean? Okay, we're here. I'll tell you what it means. So, look, after I've seen that by involving users in the design process and in the decision-making process, I saw how they felt heard and valued, which led to increased trust. And it was easier for me to get buy-in from the team this way. And so I knew that I want to take it up a notch. I knew that I want to make that bond even stronger. So here are a few things that we did that actually worked quite well in the Kubernetes migrations. Just think about it. We had to work with about 20 engineering teams. So the first thing that we did was discovery sessions. We talked with each team before they started their migrations, and we told them this: hey, let's go over your systems and your services, and let's invest the time to think about the things that you will need when you migrate to Kubernetes. So doing those discovery sessions, meeting those people ahead of time before the migration even started, it means that they saw that we are investing our time and effort in communication channels. And I'm not talking about just more Slack channels. I'm talking about creating those meetings prior to the migrations and seeing how seeing what could be potential obstacles. So then the next thing was during the migration themselves. We set up collaboration sessions. And what does it mean? It means that during the migrations, I told the developers this: look, we start working on that, and I'm going to put some meetings, placeholders, right? So it's just going to be technical support meetings, I guess. And if you guys feel that you need that, if you guys feel that you need those 30 minutes to talk to me about the Kubernetes migration, if you have some questions, then we can go ahead and meet at this time. And if you feel that it's not needed, then we can always cancel, right? It's just a calendar invite. But by putting that meeting in there, I am again making that bond even stronger. They feel that I am there for them. And obviously, it's not just me in the team, so it wasn't like I was just filling my calendar with all those placeholders meetings. So the thing that it did was it increased the trust, because the developers felt that we were there, that they have that time that we want to dedicate for sitting with them and helping them. And those sessions, they were actually really good. And I guarantee you, people, at least at Forder, they don't want to waste your time, and they don't want to waste their own time. So when they didn't need those sessions, they just canceled them. So the last thing that worked, and I promise it worked like magic for us, was the documentation feedback loop. Now, I don't know if you're ready for this, but here it comes. When we started the migrations and we gave them the migration guide, we said this: look, hey, we want you to be lazy. When you start working with that migration guide, be lazy. If you don't understand something, don't do it. If it looks too long, don't do it. If it's, I don't know, too annoying, too weird, whatever, don't do it. If you don't feel like it's easy, don't do it. I think you got the message. And why did we say that? Well, that's because I figured this: if something is too complicated for us to explain, maybe we need not to try and improve the documentation. Maybe we need to go back to our tools and simplify them. And that's what it was. I used that documentation feedback loop in order to get feedback, not just on the documentation itself, but also feedback on our tools. Are they easy enough to use? Is it readable? Is it okay? I don't know, all of that. So that's the documentation feedback loop. And those are the 3 main milestones for becoming a DevOps engineer. So let's go over everything that we had so far really, really quick, because it's almost the end of this talk. So we started by talking about the learning, use your words, using calibrated questions to understand more about the why and not so much about the how. We talked about using screenshots for creating simple, stupid how-to guides for all those things that you will not remember, or at least that's my, memory. And I think one of the crucial things that I talked about here was how user requests are just as critical as performance, cost, and ease of development when making architecture decisions. Because if you're creating a really, really good system that nobody wants to use, is it really that good? And the last thing was be the force. I talked about investing in communication channels with your users, like documentation feedback loop, and creating meetings to make that bond with them stronger. And I think that now it's time to answer the big, big question. Was it all worth it? Was it worth the effort? Well, hell yeah. Because working with multiple teams, it improved my ability to solve engineering problems with very little context. It improved my ability to adopt new tools fast and to make architecture decisions on, almost a daily basis, right? It's not every day, but it happens a lot. And most of all, I relearned to listen. And I relearned to listen to my teammates, to my customers, and to the community. And I hope that you will do the same. And thank you.